The sound of his palm hitting her F-ace silenced 300 people. Benedict stumbled backward. Her hand flew to her cheek. The E-sting spread like a wildfire across her skian, rushing from her jaw to her temple in hot, pulsing waves. Her ears ran G. Her vision blurred at the edges. The fellowship hall went dead quiet. Welcome back, my family. Today's story is for everyone who's ever been underestimated. Let's get into it. Somewhere near the dessert T Able, a woman D. Rowe apped her glass. It shattered against the tile floor, sending shards of sea crystal spinning in every direction. But nobody moved to clean it up. Nobody even flinched. Eve Rye S. Ingleperson in that room stood frozen, their eyes locked on the woman standing beneath her dead father's portrait, with a handprint B earning red across her face A. Davy straightened his tie. Slow, deliberate. Like he had all the time in the world. He adjusted his gold cufflinks, the same ones Benedict had given him for their 10th anniversary, and looked at her with the kind of disgust you save for something rotting in the garbage. "Get yourself together," he said. His voice cut through the silence like a blade, reaching every corner of the Roam. "You're making a scene at your own father's funeral." Then he turned his back on her. He walked across the fellowship hall, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the floor with each step. He didn't look back. D didn't his eye Tate. Didn't show one single ounce of shame. Because waiting for him by the exit was Tiara Jennings, teehee woman in the fitted black dress that left nothing to the imagination. The one with the red bottom heels and the designer clutch and the smile playing at the corners of her painted lips. She slipped her arm through his, like she had done it 1,000 times before. Because she had. 300 people watched Davies Montgomery walk out of his fat her-in-law's funeral with his mistress on his arm. Business executives in Tylo-red suits. Politicians who had shaken Reginald Holloway's hand at 100 funder acres. Chewarch mothers in their fine Saint hats. Community leaders. Distant relatives. Old friends. Nobody stopped H.M. Nobody said a single word. The heavy wooden douars S1 Gishu T behind them with a sound that echoed through the hall like a verdict. Most people never see betrayal coming, not until IT hits them square in the face. Not until they're SET standing alone in a room full of people who won't lift a finger to help. If you were new here, subscribe right now. Because what happens next in this S-Tory is going to change everything you think you know about Reverend G. Benedict stood perfectly still. Her cheek throbbed with every heartbeat, the pain keeping time like a Dr. Her father's portrait loomed high in her, Reginald Holloway captured in oil paint during his prime, stern and unsmiling, watching over his own funeral, like he was until judging everyone in the room, including her, especially her. The whisper started at the edges of the crowd, and Spee read inward like ripples in dark water. "Did you see that? Lord have mercy, at her own daddy's funeral. Poor the Nong W, hat's she going to do now?" Benedict heard every word. She felt the weight of 300 stares pressing down her shoulders. The pity, the judgment, the morbid curiosity of people who would tell this story for years to come. Her face burned. Her chest felt hollow. Her legs threatened to buckle beneath her. But she didn't fall. She didn't scream. She didn't chase after him. She stood there, her hand still pressed against her St. Injing cheek, her eyes fixed on the doors where her husband had disappeared. You would H another woman. What Davies Montgomery didn't know, what nobody in that fellowship hall could have possibly known, was that in exactly 72 hours, Benedict Holloway would be sitting in a lawyer's office downtown. She would sink into a leather chair that cost more than her car. A silver-haired attorney would slide a folder across a mahogany table and tell her that her father ER had changed his will 6 months before he died. He left her everything. 800 and D, $14 million. Eve Rye, single property from Atlanta to Miami. Every investment account. Every share of stock in Holloway Capital. Every piece of real estate her father had spent 50 years building from nothing. The very thing. And she would remember this exact moment. The fire on her cheek. The silence of the crowd. The click of Tiara's heels. The sight of her husband's back as he walked away without looking back. She would remember every second of it. But to understand what happened next, to understand why Benedict didn't crumble the way everyone expected her to, you need to understand something first. You need to understand how Benedict Holloway spent 34 years learning to become invisible. See, Benedict didn't learn strength from her father's love. She learned it from his silence. She didn't discover power by being seen. She discovered it by being overlooked, by watching, by waiting, by becoming so quiet that people forgot she was even in the room. Davies thought he had married a Igbo man, a doormat, a punching bag who would absorb his cruelty and never swing back. He was wrong. He just didn't know it yet. The whispers in the fellowship hall grew louder. Someone finally bent down to sweep up the broken glass. The church mother as shook their heads and clutched their purses tighter. The bus Inez associates see hecked their watches, suddenly eager to be anywhere else. Benedict lowered her hand from her cheek. The sting was already fading. But something else was eyesing up to take its place. Something cold and patient and inscient. Something that had been sleeping inside her for 34 years, waiting for exactly this moment to wake up. She had spent her entire life learning to disappear, but in 72 hours she would become the most powerful woman any of them had ever known. And Davies Montigi Omari was about to learn exactly what it cost to underestimate a quiet woman. Benedict Holloway was born a disappointment. Her father made that clear before she learned to walk. Reginald Holloway had clawed his way up from nothing, building an empire out of sweat and hunger and the kind of ruthlessness that made grown men flinch when he entered a room. Real estate, private equity, Ping Logistics, AGT $100 million created from thin air, and iron will. All he ever wanted was a son to hand it to. What he owed was Benedict. Her mother, Lorraine, had tried to give him as he demanded. 3 pregnancies, 3 boys, 3 losses before the 3rd trimester. By the time Benedict arrived, healthy and screaming and undeniably female, Lorraine's body was too broken to try again. Reginald never forgave either of them for that. Benedict grew up in a 12,000-square-foot mansion that felt like a tomb. Italian marble floors that echoed with every footstep. Crystal chandeliers that cast cold light over empty rooms. Hallways so long you could shout and never hear an answer. Her father was always somewhere else. Hong Kong, Dubai, New York. Always closing deals. Always building something bigger. Always too busy to notice the daughter wandering through his house like a ghost. When he was home, he looked through her like she was made of glass. She learned young that love was something other families had. Something she watched through windows. Something that happened in other houses, on at her streets, in other lives, not hers. Then her mother got sick. Benedict was 11 years old when Lorraine's cough turned into something worse. The doctors used words like aggressive and advanced, and there's nothing Marie we can do. They gave her 8 Montiacs. She lasted 6. Benedict sat beside her mother's hospital bed for those final weeks. She held Lorraine's hand, feeling the bones beneath the paper-thin skin. She watched her mother shrink and fade, and finally go still on a Tuesday morning when the sun was barely up. Her father was in Singapore, closing a shipping deal. He sent white lilies to the funeral. The card said, with sympathy, in fancy script. He didn't sign his name. After the burial, Benedict walked home alone. 2 miles in the rain, 11 years old, her mother in the ground. Nobody had remembered to pick her UP from the cemetery. That W as the day she stopped expecting anyone to show up for her. She taught H herself to need nothing, to want nothing, to hope for nothing. It was the only way to survive a man like Reginald Holloway. But she also taught her C, LF some ething else. She taught H herself to watch. Every Tuesday evening, her father held business meetings in his home office. He never invited Benedict, never acknowledged she existed, but he also never locked the door. So she sat in the corner, quiet as a shadow, still as furniture. She listened to men in expensive suits talk about leverage buyouts and hostile takeovers and market manipulatio N. She heard numbers that meant nothing at first and a very thinung L8er. She read the contracts her father left scattered across H's desk, the ones he assumed nobody would touch. She studied the language of power, the clauses and loopholes, the places where fortunes were won and lost with a single sentence. By 16, she would calculate compound interest faster than his CFO. She understood mergers and acquisitions before she understood heartbreak. B, but she never spoke up, never let him know what she had learned. Because speaking meant being seen. And being seen by Reginald Holloway meant being dismissed. So Benedict became something else entirely. Something patchy and not. Something invisible, something dangerous us in ways nobody would recognize until it was far too late. We've all known someone who made us feel like we didn't exist. Who looked right through us like we weren't even standing the right. Keep watching. Because the S story is about to fly everything you think you know completely upside down. Her father brought young men into his office and taught them his secrets. Protégés, he called them. Sharp-eyed boys from good families. He took them to lunch. He explained his strategy S. He treated them like the sons he never had. Benedict watched from the shadows as they came and went. Watched them learn a very thing her father refused to teach her. W watched them fail, one after another, because they had been handed everything and E ran nothing. And still, her father never looked her way. Not when she graduated at the top of her class. Not when she earned her counting degree with honors. Not when he finally moved out of that mausoleum and into a tiny apartment across town just to escape the silence. He didn't notice when she left. Probably didn't notice she had ever been there at all. Benedict told herself it didn't matter anymore. She was 23. She had survived childhood in that cold house. She had survived her mother's death. He had survived 18 years of being invisible to the one person who should have seen her most clearly. She was free now. She will be ill her own life. Find someone would actually see her. She promised herself she would never let another man make her feel invisible. Never let anyone look through her like she was nothing. Never settle for silence when she deserved to be here D. Then she met Davies and Montgomery. And she believed, for the first and last time in her life, that love had finally found her. Davies Montgomery saw her. That was highest gift. That was his weapon. Benedict met H.M. at a coffee shop on P. Actree Street during a thunderstorm. She was 23, soaking wet from running through the rain, her umbrella broken and her mascara smeared. She ordered a black coffee and sat alone by the window, dripping onto the Flu AR, while she tried to review SP read sheets on her water-spotted laptop. Davies walked straight to her table like they had known each other for years. Didn't ask if the seat was taken. Just sat down, smiled Leaky the sun breaking through clouds, and said, "You look like someone who carries the weight of the world but never tells anyone about it." Nobody had ever seen her that clearly. He was handsome in a hungry way. Sharp cheekbones, jawline T-hat could cut glass. Eyes that tracked every movement in the room like a predator assessing his territory. His suit was decent, but not expensive. His shoes were polished but worn down at the heels. He smelled like ambition and cheap cologne and something Benedict couldn't name, but wanted to get closer to. Davies had clawed his way up from nothing. Raised by his grandmother in a cramped apartment in East Baltimore. No father. His mother left Awh when he was 4 and never looked back. He worked his way through community college scrubbing dishes at a diner, then forced his way into corporate America through sheer willpower. When he looked at Benedict T., she felt seen for the first time in her entire life. She didn't tell him about her father's money, didn't mention Holloway Capital or the $800 million empire. She wanted someone to love her for who she was, not what she might one day inherit. They married within a year. Benedict wore her mother's dress. Davies cried during the vows. Her father didn't attend. He sent a check for $5,000 and a note that said, "Congratulations," with no signature. Benedict told herself she didn't need him there. She had Davies now. She had escaped her father's cold empire and found something warm. She didn't realize she had simply traded one cage for another. The first 5 years felt manageable. Davies worked brutal hours at a mid-level consulting firm. Heil Benedict handled everything at home. She managed their budget down to the penny, stretched every dollar, made their cramped apartment feel like a home. She had a degree in accounting, but chose not to work because Davies insisted he wanted a traditional wife. Dinner on the table when he walked in. A house that ran smoothly. A woman who supported his vision without asking for the spotlight. Benedict convinced herself this was partnership. This was what marriage looked like. Then Davies got promoted. Then promoted again. Corner office. Company car. Expense account. Business trips that stretched from 2 days to 2 weeks. And somewhere between the third promotion and fourth, her husband turned into someone she didn't recognize. It started with small cuts. He criticized her cooking, too salty, too bland. Why couldn't she get this right by now? He mocked the way she dressed, outdated, embarrassing. Did she even own a mirror? He made comments about her weight, about her face, about every part of her he could find to pick apart. "You were lucky I married you," he said one evening without a ven looking up from his phone. "No other man would want someone this plain, this forgettable." Benedict absorbed every word. She had spent her whole life absorbing. Her father had never loved her. Her mother had died and left her alone. Maybe this was simply what she deserved. Have you ever been taken for granted by someone who should have loved you? Someone who made you feel like you would never be enough no matter how hard you tried? Comment below and tell me what happened. I read every single one. The credit card statements told a story Davies thought she would never read. Hotel suites in cities he claimed to visit for work. Expensive dinners for 2 hen he was supposed to be eating alone. Jewelry purchases that appeared like clockwork. Necklaces and bracelets and diamond earrings that Benedict never saw, never wore, never received. She knew exactly where they were going. She just couldn't make herself say it out loud. The other woman had a name, Tiara Jennings, 20 N Inye Rs old, marketing executive at Davies's firm. The kind of woman who commanded attention just by entering a room, loud where Benedict was quiet, bold where Benedict was careful. She wore red bottoms and designer handbags and posted photos on private social med IA accounts that made fun of the boring little weffie who had no idea what her husband did on business trips. But Tiara wasn't just sleeping with another woman's husband for fun. She was doing it for profit. The week she started the affair, Tiara researed Ched Benedict's family tree. She found the articles about Reginald Holloway, the self-made billionaire, the real estate titan, the shipping magnate worth more money than most people could count. She found out he had one child, a daughter. A daughter married to the man currently warming Tiara's bed. Tiara did the math. She liked the numbers. The affair had nothing to do with love, nothing to do with passion. It was about access. It was about waiting for an old man to die and collecting the inheritance his overlow oak de udder would receive. Davies was Tiara's way in. Benedict was the obstacle. The fortune was the prize. Together, they whispered. They schemed. They waited. All they needed was for Regin Ald Holloway to die. Then they would push Benedict aside, divorce her, discard her like garbage, and split everything she inherited down the middle. They just had to be patient. Into her teen days, D. Aves Montgomery would stand on his own front lawn, surrounded by cardboard boxes, locked out of his own house, staring at the woman H.E. had slapped in front of 300 people at her father's funeral. She wouldn't be crying. She wouldn't be begging. She would be smiling. But that satisfying moment was still 13 days away. First, Benedict had to belie her father, and Survey VW had happened at the funeral. What Tiara didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have predicted, would destroy every single thing she had ever planned. Stay with me. Reginald Holloway died on a rainy Tuesday in October. Massive heart attack. Found slumped over his DSK at 7 in the morning G, still clutching a quarterly report in his cold finge RS. The housekeeper screamed so loud, the neighbors called the police. He was 74 years old. He had built an empire worth $800 million, and he had never, not once in her entire life, told his daughter that he loved her. Benedict got the phone call before the sun came up. She was standing in her kitchen, pouring coffee into a chipped mug, when her cell buzzed with an unknown number. The voice on the other end was flat and professional. A hospital administrator reading from a script. We regret to inform you that Reginald Holloway passed away this morning. You're listed as his emergency contact. We need someone to identify the body. She set the phone down on the compteur, stared at it for a long moment. The coffee maker gurgled behind her. The faucet dripped. The world kept moving like nothing had changed. Then everything hit her at once. Grief and relief crashed together inside her chest, so tangled up she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Her father was dead. The man who had made her feel worthless for the 34 years was gone. She should have felt free. Instead, she felt like someone had reached inside her and pulled out something vital without asking permission. Benedict P.L. and the funeral alone. Davies didn't offer to help, didn't ask what she needed. When she told him her F.A. there had died, he looked up from his phone long enough to say, "S. Ori for your loss," before geoing back to whatever text message was more important than his wife's grief. She watched him at the wake, watched him work the room like it was a cocktail party instead of a memorial. Haking hands with businessmen, exchanging cards with politicians, checking his phone every few minutes to respond to texts from someone Benedict Prett ended not to notice. She knew who he was texting. She just couldn't make herself care anymore. Greater Mount Zion Baptist Church sat on a hill overlooking downtown Atlanta. Red brick A&W height coal and stained glass windows that turned afternoon sunlight into rivers of color. This was the same church where Benedict's mother, had been buried 26 years earlier. Same wooden pews worn smooth by generations of hands. Same pulpit where preachers had delivered comfort and condemnatio N in equal M east Ure. 3 HU-100 people came to honor Reginald Holloway, business executives in dark suits and silk ties. Politicians who had accepted his campaign donations and posed for photos at a dozen fundraise REUs, community leaders who had benefited from his charity, the charity he gave to strangers while ignoring his own flesh and blood. Church others in elaborate hats, old acquaintances, new enemies, people who anted to be seen at the funeral of a powerful Mayan. They came to honor someone who had built an empire but failed to build a family. Benedict sat in the front pew, black dress, hands folded in her lap, eyes dry as bone. She had cried enough tears for her father during childhood. She had cried alone in her bedroom on birthdays he forgot. At G. Radu, a Tion's he skiped, a T. her mother's funeral, where he didn't even bother to show up. She had no tears left for him. Not anymore. The service was beautiful. The pastor spoke about legacy and generosity and the eternal reward waiting for the faithful. He talked about Reginald's business success, his charitable donations, his commitment to the community. He painted a portrait of a great man. Benedict sat there listening to stories about a stranger. What would you do if you caught that look? At your own father's funeral? From your husband and his mistress? Comment below. I want to know. Then the doors at the back of the church swung open. Tiara Jennings walked in like she owned the place. Fitted black dress clinging to every curve. Stiletto H-eel clicking against the hardwood floor with each calculated step. Gold jewelry catching the colored light streaming through the stained glass windows. She moved like a woman who expected every head to turn, and they did. Tiara slid into a pew near the back. She crossed her legs, folded her manicured hands, and then her eyes swept across the sanctuary until they found exactly who she was looking for. Davies. He lasted exactly 1 second. 1 second of eye contact across a church full of mourners. 1 second that carried an entire conversation. Benedict saw it, caught the whole thing from her seat in the front row. That look didn't say, "I'm sorry you're going through this." It didn't say, "I'll wait for you outside." It said something else entirely. It said, "I own him." It said, "He's already mine." It said, "You're just too stupid to know you've already lost." Something cracked inside Benedict, not shattered, cracked, like a seed splitting open in dark soil, making room for something new to grow. After the service ended, mourners gathered in the fellowship hall for the repast. Long tables covered in white linen, He held platters of fried chicken and collard greens and mac and cheese and sweet potato pie. The smell of coffee and furniture, Polish and expensive perfume filled the air. Benedict stood near her father's portrait, accepting condolences from people who had known Reginald better than she ever did. Your father was a great man. He did so much for this community. You must be so proud of everything he built. She nodded. She smiled. She shook hands that felt like paper and accepted hugs that smelled like mothballs and old flowears. Across the room, Davies was laughing. He stood in a circle of men in expensive suites, a drink in his hand, telling some joke that made everyone around him chuckle. Like this was a cocktail party. Like his wife wasn't standing 20 feet away, trying to bury her father alone. Tiara watched from across the hall, smirking over a glass of red wine. Waiting. Benedict needed her husband. Just for a moment. Just for 5 minutes of suppo RT while she buried the E-man who had never wanted her. She needed someone to stand beside her. Just once. She walked across the room, touched his arm, whispered his name. Davies. Can you come stand with me? People keep asking about Daddy's business, and I don't know what to say. He looked at her like she was an interruption, like she was a stain on his sleeve. His jaw tightened. His eyes flicked across the room to where H's colleagues were watching, to where Tiara was watching. She touched his arm, whispered at his name, asked him for 5 minutes of comfort at her own father's funeral. H's jaw tightened. His colleagues were watching. Tiara was watching. And what happened next would be seared into the memory of every single person in that room. A moment so cruel, so public, so devastating, that it will cost Davies Montgomery everything he had ever wanted. 3 days after her father's funeral, Benedict sat in a leather chair that cost more than her car, waiting to hear how little she would receive. The law offices of Whitmore, Prescott and Associates took up the entire top floor of a downtown high-rise. Mahogany walls polished to a mirror shiny. Oil paintings in gilded frame ES. Oriental rugs thick enough to swallow footsteps. Teehee kind of hushed silence that only very old money can afford. Benedict felt out of place in her simple black dress. The same one she had worn to the funeral. The semi one she had worn when her husband slapped her in front of 300 people. She didn't own anything nicer. Davies controlled the Ban K accounts. She had taken a cab here by herself. Davies hadn't offered to come. Said he was busy with work emergencies, which Benedict now understood meant he was busy with Tiara. The attorney's name was Franklin Whitmore. Silver hair swept back from a high forehead. Wire-rimmed G-lasses that made him look like a college professor. Hands that moved with the precision of a surgeon. Each gesture practiced said over decades of delivery nuance that changed people's lives. He had been her father's lawyer for 30 years. Had probably drafted contracts worth more money than Benedict would ever see in her lifetime. She braced herself for disappointment. Her father had spent 34 years proving she was unworthy of his legacy. She expected everything would go to his business partners. His chariot eyes. The young men he had groomed to take his place. The protégés he had treated like sons, while his actual daughter sat invisible in the corner of his office, learning everything he refused to teach her. Maybe he had left her something small, a token amount, just enough to remind her one last time that she was an afterthought. Franklin Whitmore re-slid a folder across the mahogany table. The sound was soft, but it carried weight far beyond paper and ink. Mrs. Montgomery? His voice was careful, measured. Your father updated his will 6 months before highest D ETH. I want you to understand that his was entirely his decision. MAW with full L clarity of mind. Witnessed and notarized in accordance with every legal requirement. Benedict's stomach tightened. Here it comes, she tho ut. The explanation of why she got almost ain't nothing. He left a very thing to you. The words didn't compute. They float D in the air between him, refusing to arrange themselves into anything that made sense. I'm sorry. What? Everything. Franklin Whitmore met her eyes without blinking. The entire tie of Holloway Capital, all commercial and residential properties, all investment accounts, all liquid assets. Benedict stopped breathing. The total estimated value, as of last month's assessment, is approximately $814 million. The room tilted. The mahogany walls seemed to lean in closer. Benedict gripped the arms of the leather chair, suddenly terrified she might slide right onto the floor. $814 million. Her father had left her everything. There's more. F. Franklin reached into his briefcase and withdrew a sealed envelope. Cream-colored paper. Her name written on the front in cramped handwriting she would have recognized anywhere. His same handwriting she had S-ean on 1,000 contract T's she was never supposed to read. Your father left a personal letter. He asked that I give it to you privately. Benedict's hand Diaz trembled as she took the envelope. The seal cracked beneath her fingers. The paper inside was thick and heavy, real in a way that made everything else feel like a dream. She unfolded it slowly. The first line made her gasp. Benedict, I spent my life building walls. Her eyes blurred with tears she hadn't known were there. She blinked hard, kept reading. I told myself that daughters we that leaving you my MPRE would be the same as throwing it away. That writhing I buy loot would crumble in your hands. I was a fool and a coward. I watched you from a distance your whole life. You never knew, but I saw everything. I saw you sitting in the corner of my office during meetings, absorbing a very word. I saw you reading my contra CTs when you thought nobody was paying attention. I saw you calculating numbers in your head faster than grown men with business degrees. I saw you survive a marriage to a man who treats you even worse than I ever did. You are stronger than anyone I have ever known, stronger than me. Stronger than any of those boys I wasted my time trying to turn into heirs. I was too proud to say any of this while I was alive, too stubborn, too afraid of what it would mean to admit I was wrong about you. I am sorry. This empire is yours now, Benedict. Every single brick of it. Every dollar. Every deed. Burn it all down or BUIL'd it even higher. Either way, it belongs to you. Your father. Tears streamed down Benedict's face. Not for the money. She couldn't have cared less about the money. Be out for the words she had waited 34 years to hear, the acknowledgement she had given up hoping for. He had seen her. All along He had been witching. And he was sorry. This story is about to change everything. Don't miss what appends next. Subscribe now before the biggest twist catches you completely off guard. Then something unexpected happened. Benedict laughed. The sound surprised her. She couldn't remember the last time she had laughed out loud. It started small, just a breath of air escaping her lips. It grew, bigger and louder until her shoulders were shaking, and tears were running down her cheeks, and she couldn't tell any more if she was laughing or crying. Franklin Whitmore sat perfectly still across the table, watching, waiting. Probably wondering if his client had lost her mind. The truth was, she didn't know herself. 34 years of silence, 34 years of being invisible, in her own home, in her own family, in her own marriage, and now this. All of it. Everything. She folded the letter carefully, slid it into her purse, took a deep breath. The hat seemed to pull air from somewhere she didn't know existed. When she spoke, her voice was steady as steel. What do I need to sign? She spent the next hour going through paperwork, initialing documents. Igini nung her name over and over until her hand cramped. Franklin explained the structure of the holdings, the various accounts, the properties spread across 6 St. Eights. She absorbed every word the same way she had absorbed her father's business meetings as a child. Quiet, patient, missing nothing. When it was finally done, she stood up from the leather chair and shook Franklin Whitmore's hand. Thank you for everything. Mrs. Montgomery. He held her hand a moment longer than necessary. Your father was a difficult man, but in the end, he saw what the rest of us could see all along. You are exactly what this company needs. Benedict walked out of the law office into the bright afternoon sun. The city spread out below her, gleaming on steel and glass. Millions of people going about their lives without any idea that everything had just changed. She thought about Davies, about the slap that still echoed in her memory, about 15 years of insultees and St. Olin money and jewelry bought for another woman, about the way he had walked out of her father's funeral with his mistress on his arm without even looking back. He thought she was nothing G. He thought that she was broken. H.E. thought she would crumble quietly and disappear like she had always doony. Davies Montgomery had no idea that in exactly 72 hours, his wife would own everything he had ever Dr. Eamed of, and she would remember every single insult he had ever thrown at her, every dollar he had stolen, every cruel word whispered in the dark. The reckoning was coming, and she would show absolutely no mercy. Benedict didn't confront Davies. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't throw things or make accusations or beg for explanations she already knew the answers to. She did something far more dangerous. I investigated. For 15 years, she had been reactive, absorbing pain like a sponge, swallowing insults like bitter medicine, staying silent when every cell in her body wanted to scream. She had spent her entire marriage waiting for Davies to change, waiting for things to get better, waiting for a version of her husband that never existed in the first place. That woman was dead now, buried somewhere between the slap at her father's funeral and the moment she walked out of Franklin Whitmore's office with $800 million in her name. The new Benedict didn't wait. The new Benedict moved. She hired a forensic accountant named Marcellus Webb on a Tuesday morning. Gave him access to every financial record from her marriage. Bank statements, credit card bills, investment accounts, tax returns. Everything Davies thought she was too stupid to understand. Within 2 weeks, Marcellus had documentation of Eve Rye's single $1 her husband had stolen. $412,000. Siphoned over 3 years. Transferred D in amounts just small enough H to avoid automatic fraud detection. All of it traced to the same destination. Tiara Jennings S. luxury apartment rentals in Midtown. Designer shopping sprees at Lenox Square. Spa weekends at 5-star resorts. First-class flights to Miami and Las Vegas in the Bahamas. And one very specific charge that made Benedict's blood run cold. A down payment on a 2-bedroom condo in Buckhead. The C.E. Ondo Davies planned to move into after he divorced her. He had been planning his exit for over a year. Few relishing his NEW life with her money, while he smiled in her face and called her forgettable. Next, she hired a PR I-8 investigator named Celeste Monroe. 52 white years old, former FBI. The kind of woman who could find a needle in a haystack, and tell you what the needle had for breakfast. Celeste delivered photographs within a week. Davies and Tiara at Hotel Pou LS. Davies and Tiara at restaurant tables. Davies and Tiara in the front seat of his company car, parked in a lot behind an Office E building, doing things that would make HR representatives faint. She delivered text messages too, screenshots pulled from cloud backups Tiara thought she had deleted. Miss you, baby. Can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore. She's so clueless, literally has no idea. Once the old man dies, we move fast. G at her to sign whatever we need, then push her out. Benedict read every message we see. Let the words sink into her bones. Let the rage build nice and slow, like coals catching fire. But Celeste found something else. Something that changed everything. A folder on Tiara's laptop, backed up to the cloud like everything else. The folder was Title D Holloway Contingency. Inside were draft legal document SPR paired by an attorney Benedict had never heard of. The documents claimed that Benedict Holloway Montgomery was mentally unfit to inherit her father's estate. They cited emotional instability, erratic behavior, a documented history of psychological episodes. There was a psychiatric evaluation attached, signed by a doctor named Vernon Ashford D. A doctor who had never met Benedict, never examined her, never even spoken to her. But for the right price, he was willing to testify that she was incompetent to manage a fortune. Davies and Tiara weren't just stealing her money, they were planning to steal her entire inheritance. If this story is hitting different right now, imagine what the next T-twist is going to do. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single satisfying moment. T. His plan was elegant in its cruelty. Contest the will. Claim Benedict was mentally unstable. Use the funeral bray down as evidence. Get her declared incompetent by the courts. Then swoop in as the concerned husband and take control of everything. The slap wasn't just cruelty. It was strategy. Davies had hit her in front of 300 witnesses on purpose. He wanted a reaction. He wanted her to scream, to cry, to fall apart in public. He wanted evidence of the mental instability they were going to claim in court. He needed her to break. But Benedict hadn't broken. She had stood perfectly still, absorbed the blow, watched him walk away with his mistress, and said nothing. Because patience wasn't weakness. Patience was warfare. Now it was time to collect. Benedict walked into the Holloway Capital boardroom on a Friday morning, earring a black pantsuit that cost more than Davies made in a Mont H. She had bought it the day before, with her own money, from her own accounts that now held more zeros than her husband had ever dreamed of. 12 board members at around the polished table, gray-haired men who had known her father for decades. They looked at her with curiosity, skepticism, and the faint condescension of people who didn't believe a woman belonged in this room. She didn't care what they believed. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice carrying to every corner without rising above conversation level. "My name is Benedict Holloway. I am the sole heir to my father's estate and the new majority shareholder of this company. Starting today, I will be taking an active role in operations. She sat down in her father's chair. It fit perfectly. Then she made 3 phone calls. The first C all went to the CEO of Davies's company. Benedict T. introduced herself, polite lie. Explained that she had evidence of expense report fraud, misuse of company resources, and conduct violations committed by an employee named Davies Montgomery. She offered to end the documentation immediately. The CEO thanked her for bringing this to his attention. Dav IEs was terminated within 48 hours. Security escort him from the building. His Comp Any laptop was confiscated. His access badges were deactivated. His career way over before lunch. The second call went to the same company's HR department. Benedict provide documentation of an inappropriate workplace relationship between Davies Montgomery and Tiara Jennings. She included screenshots OF messages sent during work hours, photographs taken in Compa NY vehicles, evidence of company resources used to facilitate the affair. Tier A was escorted out by security before noon, still holding her coffee. The same coffee she had begun sipping that morning while posting on her private account about how the boring wife had no idea what was coming. The third call went to Teehee's most ruthless divorce attorney in Atlanta, a woman named Octavia Blackwell, known for representing betrayed spouses, known for leaving nothing on the table. Benedict wanted full dissolute ion, recovery of all stolen assets, for NSIC accounting to trace every penny that had gone to Tiara, and absolutely no negotiation. Octavia took the case immediately. Some people will say Benedict went too far. That revenge never solves anything. Others will say Davies got exactly what he deserved, maybe even less than he deserved. What do you think? Drop your verdict in the comments. Guilty or justified? When Davies drove home that evening, he found his belongings scattered across the front lawn. Cardboard boxes stacked on wet grass, clothes spilling out of garbage bags, his golf clubs, his video game console, the watch collection he thought Bened ICT didn't know about. The locks had been changed. A security team in black suits blocked his entrance. 3 large men with earpieces who low-oaked like they had done tis kin D of thing before. And standing on the porch, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun, was his wife. Benedict wore her mother's pearls around her neck, the ones Lorraine had worn on her wedding day, the ones Benedict had kept hidden in a safety depot's box for 26 years, waiting G for a moment that mattered D. This moment mattered. Davies stormed across the lawn, his face twisted with fury. What the hell is this? You can't throw me out of my own house. Benedict didn't flinch. This isn't your house. It never was. I bought it with my inheritance 3 years ago. You just didn't know that. You're insane. You've lost your mind. I'm calling my lawyer. Go ahead. She smiled. The first real smile in longer than she could remember. But you should know, I've already called mine. She reached into her pocket and pulled out an envelope, held it out toward him like she was offering a gift. Divorce papers. Full dissolution. I've frozen every account you have access to, every asset you thought you were hiding, every dollar you funneled to your girlfriend. I'm taking all of it back. Davies's face went white, then red. His hand shook. His jaw clenched so tight she could see the musk jumping beneath his skin. You can't do this. I'm your husband. We built this life together. No. Davies, You built nothing. You stole from me while I wasn't looking. You cheated on me with a woman who laughed about me behind my back. You slapped me at my father's funeral in front of 300 people. She stepped closer, close enough to smell his cologne, close enough to see the fear beginning to creep into his eyes. And you had a plan, she continued. A folder on your girlfriend's computer called Holloway Contingency. Legal documents to have me declared mentally unfit. A psychiatrist you be bribed to testify against me. You were going to steal my inherit aunts and leave me with nothing. The color drained completely from his face. That slap wasn't just cruelty, Benedict said. It was strategy. You wanted me to break down. You wanted witnesses to my instability. Why you needed evidence for your little scheme. She smiled again, colder this time. But I didn't break down. I stood there and watched you walk away, and I waited. Davy's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. You wanted my father's empire, Benedict said. You schemed for it. You lied for it. You humiliated me for it. But you forgot one very important thing. She straightened her mother's pearls. I am my father's daughter, and I don't forgive ye. I don't forget. She leaned in close enough that her next words were almost a whisper. I collect. Then she turned around, walked back through the door, and closed it in his face. 15 years of silence ended. Still not subscribed? Still watching from the outside looking in? Tell me in the comments what's holding you back. I genuinely want to know, because if you're missing stories like this, you're missing out on the most satisfying content on this platform. The rain was falling harder now. Davies's cardboard ard boxes were soaking through on the lawn, the senior shirts and expensive suits turning dark with water. But Benedict didn't invite him inside. She had something left to say first. She stood on the porch, dry beneath the overhang, watching her husband realize that everything he had ever planned was falling apart in real time. Davies stood in the rain. No umbrella, no shelter. Just a man in a suit that cost $2,000, getting drenched while his belongings turned into garbage. You slapped me at my father's funeral. Her voice was calm. Level. The kind of quiet that makes people lean in because they know something important is being said. You did it in front of 300 witnesses, business executives, politicians, church members, PEOPLA who are going to remember that moment for the rest of their lives. People who are going to tell that story at dinner parties for decades. Davies saw nothing. Rain ran down his face like tears he was too proud to cry. You thought I was nothing, Benedict continued. You thought I had nothing. You thought I was weak and stupid and invisible. You thought I would crumble and disappear the same way I always did. Just fade into the background while you took everything. She paused. The sound of the rain filled the silence between them. You were wrong. Hyas' face twisted with something between rage and desperation. His hands led into fists at his sides. You can't do this to me. I'm your husband. We're married. Benedict smiled. The expression felt foreign on her face, like a muscle she hadn't used in years, finally remembering how to work. Not for long. She held up the envelope, the divorce papers. His future, condensed into a stack of legal documents. Full dissolution. Forensic accounting of the very cent you stole. Recovery of all assets. And I've already had a conversation with my lawyers about that little contingency folder you thought nobody would find. Davies's face went gray. His mouth enid, but nothing came out. The incompetency claim, Benedict said. The bribed psychiatrist. The plan to have me declared mentally unfit so you could take control of my inheritance. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? For a moment, she thought he might try to hit her again. His fists clenched together. His jaw worked like he was chewing on words he couldn't quite spit out. The security guards behind her lifted their weight, ready to move. But Davies didn't swing. Because an ally understood something he should have realized 15 years ago. She wasn't afraid of him anymore, and that terrified him more than anything else ever could. You wanted me to break down at that funeral, Benedict said. You needed witnesses, evidence of my instability. You slapped me in front of 300 people because you were counting on me to fall apart. She stepped to the edge of the porch, let the rain mist against her face. But I didn't fall apart. I stood there. I absorbed the blow W. I watched you walk away with your mistress, and I waited. Because I am my father's daughter, and Holloways don't break. We be end. We calculate. We wait. She straightened her mother's pearls one last time. And then we collect. She turned, walked back through the dew ore. Let it close behind her with a soft click that sounded D like a period at the end of a very long sentence. 15 years of silence. Over. If this story oved you, if you felt something watching Benedict re-see from the ashes of everything that tried to destroy her, then imagine what the next one is going to do. Subscribe right now. Turn on notifications. Because stories like this are why this channel exists. 6 months passed. Benedict's attorney forwarded her an article from the Atlanta Business Chronicle one Tuesday morning. The headline made her pause over her coffee. Former executive files for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. The photograph showed Dav I.E.'s leaving the federal courthouse. His suit was wrinkled. His tie was crow-okayed. He carried a cardboard beox under one arm, the kind they give you when you're cleaning out or desk for the last time. No company car waiting at the sea herb. No driver holding the door. No colleagues offering sympathetic handshakes. Just a man walking alone through a parking garage, surrounded by the wreckage of everything he thought he deserved. The A article mentioned that Davies Montgomery had been unable to find employment in his field following termination for cause, that his assets had been liquidated to pay divorce settlements and legal fees, that he was currently living in a studio apartment in a part of town he used to drive through with his windows up. Benedict read the article twice. Then she deleted the email and went back to work. Tiara Jennings had disappeared from social media on tier lie. Every account deleted, every post era said, every carefully curated image of her glamorous life scrubbed from the internet. But Celeste Monroe, the investigator, had found one last post before Tiara went day-RK. A photograph outside a Greyhound bus station in Macon, Georgia. Tiara standing on cray-kecked concrete with 2 suitcases at her feet. No designer bags, no red bottom heels. Just a woman in worn jeans and a faded jacket, waiting for a bus to take her somewhere else. The caption read, "Starting over. Comet S were disabled." The Buckhead condo she had dreamed about never happened. The down payment had been clawed back in the divorce proceedings. The luxury apartment in Midtown was gone. The designer clothes had been sold on consignment months earlier. Everything Tiara had schemed for had turned to dust. Benedict wasn't satisfied with destruction. She was building. Under her leadership, Holloway Capital expanded in directions her father had never considered. affordable housing developments in neighborhoods that needed them, small business loans for entrepreneurs the banks wouldn't touch, co-immunity investment programs that created job SI instead of just extracting wealth. She funded scholarships for young women studying business, SS, and finance. CR aided mentorship programs pairing female executives with college students. Established the Lorraine Holloway Foundation in her mother's name, dedicated to supporting single mothers and their children. She sat in her father's office every morning, watching the sun rise over the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. The same office VOH Reginald had died clutching a quarterly report. The same chair where he had made her feel invisible for 34-year. Now it was hers. All of it. And she was doing thing S with it that would have made her father proud. Things that would have made her mother cry with joy. Things that mattered beyond balance sheets and profit margins. She had spent 34 years being invisible, overlooked, dismissed, underestimated by everyone who should have known better. Now everyone knew her name. See Ament Phoenix if you're ready to rise like Benedict. I want to see how many of us are done be ing invisible, done being underestimated, done waiting for PR mission to become who we were always meant to be. Benedict stood at her office window as the sun finished its climb above the Atlanta skyline. The city spread out beneath her, gleaming and alive, full of people fighting their own battles against people who underestimated them. She thought about her father, the walls he built, the apology he co-UL'd only deliver from BI on the grave, the empire he left her to burn or build. She thought about her mother, the pearls around her neck, the foundation that would carry Lorraine's name into the future. She thought about Davies, standing in the rain on her lawn, watching everything HE had ever wanted slip through his finger like water. She thought about the slap, the islands of the fellowship hall, the 3 hundred people who watched and did nothing. And she thought about the woman who had stood there and absorbed the blow without breaking, the woman who had waited her whole life for the right moment, the woman who had finally spoken. The key A1s are rarely weak. They are simply waiting for the right moment to speak. Benedict Holloway had waited 34 years, and when she finally spoke, everyone listened. Hit that like button if she hand-let it exactly right. No screaming, no begging, no losing control, just patience, PL Anning, and collecting exactly what was owed. That's not revenge, that's justice. And if you're not subscribed yet, you're missing stories that will change the way you see everything. Subscribe now, turn on notifications, and I'll see you in the next one.